Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. Thank you so much for joining us for this special episode of our podcast. We sit down with the Reverend Solomon W. Kinloch Jr., the senior pastor of Triumph Church in Detroit, who announced his candidacy for mayor of Detroit this week. 5,000 people showed up at the Fox Theater in downtown Detroit to hear Reverend Kinloch make the case to become the city's next mayor. We sit down with him for his first media interview since his announcement. Stay with us right after this break. The Reverend Solomon Kinloch, the senior pastor of Triumph Church, one of the largest African-American churches in the nation, shocked Detroit this week when he announced his candidacy for the mayorship of Detroit. And of course, I've known Reverend Kinloch for a very long time. He's watched the ministry of Triumph Church back in 2021. He decided to give the opening eulogy at the funeral for his mother, Janae Kinloch, who was a former sharecropper from Dillon County in South Carolina. Reverend Kinloch, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bankole, for having me this morning.
You know, I want to lead off with that. You are the son of a former sharecropper. Your background, you sought to explain that at Fox Theater in downtown Detroit, where 5,000 people showed up to hear your message. Talk about that. What it means like to grow up in a house with, where your mother is a former sharecropper and your father was like the everyday individual who was walking.
Like many people who will see and hear this interview, our DNA has been woven, like mine, with rural parents who migrated up north, escaped the terrorism of the South, at a time where there was insurmountable disparities, inequities, and inequalities. And they were looking to have America deliver on the promise that every man has an unalienable right to pursue happiness in his own individual way. And coming up in an environment where they saw not only the best that life had the potential to yield and believing in that, but also experiencing the worth, it put me in an environment that tenderized me, that sensitized me in order to use my life in a way that not just benefited myself, but benefit people to make this world a better place when we leave it than the way we found it. It was often a quotation in that house that reminded us something that was often said, that service is the rent we pay for the space we occupy, that we never just live for us, but we always live as a vessel that can be used to bless other people.
Which is what I want to talk about, because your message at the Fox Theater was that you want to take care of the underdog, the little guy, people who are largely ignored, have been largely ignored in the recovery of Detroit. I want to get into that, but I want to bring this up right away because the Detroit News is reporting that you had liens on some of your property going back to 2006, 2 decades ago. I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
Well, I've never denied or shied away from the fact that I did not come from a place of privilege or prosperity. I came from a place of struggle. And I also came from a family that was birthed and born with nothing and never had anything. And whenever God blesses you, you never just live to be a benefit and blessing to yourself, but to your family, to your friend and kin. Bankole, I have a flaw. That some will call a flaw, but I call it a raison d'etre for life and living. I have never lived for myself. I've always lived to be a benefit and blessing to the people around me. And when you live like that, sometimes it's a detriment to yourself when you're helping other people. I believe it becomes important because we're facing a time, the COVID money is drying up. More than $800 million in this city is going to be gone in the next budget. You have to have somebody in that seat that knows how to make tough decisions, that know how to prioritize spending, but also knows how to be compassionate and knows that the number one concern in every decision should be people. And so I don't shy away from the fact when you have sick parents, when you have siblings that are in poverty and you have their children that are financially struggling and you're trying to juggle and balance that, it gives you the ability you need in order to make tough decisions and tough choices.
And I want to get into it right away. Affordable housing, you talked about a striking house force or a coalition, if you will, to address the question of affordable housing. Let's talk about that because Detroit has been what I call a memorial to income inequality, poverty, and so much of that cruel poverty that we see in the city of Detroit. And it was reflected recently in the lives of two Black kids who were frozen to death in the parking lot of a casino in downtown Detroit. In fact, you gave the eulogy at that funeral yesterday. I want to talk about that, though, because that's all ties into this question of housing, a housing crisis that the city of Detroit has. And how does the next mayor of Detroit, if that was you, how would you address that issue?
Well, Bankole, one of the things that I see is that we have a great foundation. We have a better foundation than we've had in a long time. And what we need to do is use this opportunity in order to build on that. Part of building on that is ensuring that that prosperity is not just happening in downtown, but it's happening throughout the whole town. It's not just in one part of the city, but it needs to spill over to the entire city. One of the things that we will do is to intentionally have a strategy to deal with homelessness and poverty. There is no reason in a city with this type of resources that we cannot come together and coalesce and create a coalition to constructively deal with these problems. Those are not just those people, those are our people. That family, 3 generations, 2 of those children I eulogized and buried on yesterday. Just think about it. That's 3 generations in a car and 2 babies froze to death in a city with this much resource. There is no way that anybody can be apathetic and not be sympathetic and willing to be, my friends, empathetic so that we can ensure what happened to those children would never happen again. As mayor, we will develop an intentional strategy in order to deal with that by partnering with our foundations, by partnering with our corporate leaders, by partnering with our community leaders in order to make sure that we are creating housing so that nobody has to sleep in their car in a city like this.
You know, as you're speaking, Reverend Kinloch, I'm reminded of this saying from the great Rabbi Abraham Yahshua Heschel, who walked with Dr. King. In fact, when he marched with Selma in Dr. King, he said, you know, when I marched in Selma, my feet was praying. Rabbi Heschel has a saying, when I read his writings, he says, some are responsible, but all are guilty. And I feel very strongly about the question of income inequality in the city of Detroit. And the issue becomes, when can this become a thing of the past? Because we see it's so brazen in our eyes, and I feel like, and I'm concerned though that perhaps, you know, whether the death of these 2 little kids, you know, who did not have to die, whether that's enough to shock the conscience of Detroit leaders.
I believe that the average Detroiter, I believe that an ordinary person, when they saw the tragedy that took place in that vehicle, I believe that it pricked the heart of every parent. As I stood over those 2 children yesterday, all I could do is think about my son, because they're by the grace of God. And Bankole, that's what fuels me. And that's why we need somebody in that chair that's not just boasting about their experience, how much experience they have, but how can you use your experience to impact the experiences of the people that live in this city. I've been fueled all of my life. I know what that feels like. I know the shame, the embarrassment that comes from poverty, living like that as a child. I remember the Child Protective Services knocking on my door in the middle of the night and talking to my parents, telling them they cannot keep us in a house like this. We have to ensure that that feeling that I had and that feeling that so many children in this city is wrestling with, families are wrestling with, mothers and fathers are wrestling with. We got to make sure that we put together a cohesive plan in order to address that and deal with that. I do believe that this is a moment. I believe that something special is happening in the atmosphere, that people are standing up saying it's sick, they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we got to do like Eddie Gall says with the title of his book. He says, we have to become the leaders we're looking for.
So, and I want to talk about this, the Tale of Two Cities. You raised it up in your speech at the Fox Theater. You talked about Detroit being a tale of two cities, and it takes me back to in the 70s when the late Maynard Jackson became the mayor of Atlanta. And I remember when I watched his campaign speech, he said he was running for the other Atlanta that has been forgotten in the revitalization of the city of Atlanta. And I want to bring it back from Maynard Jackson to where Detroit is today. The other Detroit, because we've seen downtown. It's I've written about this in my columns in the Detroit News. I've talked about this. Downtown has become the Taj Mahal of the Midwest, if you will. And this tale of two cities, talk about that though, in terms of you, because I know you've been talking. I would expect any mayoral candidate who's running, like yourself and others, have been talking to people. What are you hearing from Detroiters on this question of the tale of two cities, the other Detroit?
As I previously stated, we're in a place now that we have not been in a long time. We have a great and solid foundation. We have to build on it. We know that downtown is making traction in a good and great way, but that has to spill over. It cannot just stay compartmentalized, and it cannot stay just limited to the downtown area. It has to spill over to every neighborhood. We need a Woodward Avenue on every neighborhood and in every neighborhood. I remember in the announcement, just the self-degradation that many times I heard. Why are we going to the Fox? Why are we going to the Fox? It wasn't because they didn't have the perception that the Fox was a great place, but some people feel like there's certain places and spaces in this city that they don't belong. And what we have to do is change that every place in this space should feel welcoming, and they should be receptive of all Detroiters. And I believe, Bankole, that this is an opportunity that we can ensure that happens, that spreads throughout the city of Detroit. Yes, we have to work on the side of businesses. We have to work with the philanthropic community. And I believe that they want to work with us. The power of the mayoral office is not just the ability to communicate vision. It's also a responsibility to convene visionaries. And I believe that if we put business leaders, we put community leaders, activists, advocates, and philanthropical leaders at a table, that we can do more in this new administration that we've seen. No one is suggesting that we have not come a long ways, but we've got to confess and admit that we still got a long way to go, and we still got a lot of people to reach. And until we get to a place where we know we cannot afford to leave no Detroiter behind, that we have to ensure that every Detroiter have access to the same resources that downtown have, we'll never be able to spill that revival and that renaissance over through the rest of the town.
Do you feel that many Detroiters have become exiled in their own city?
I feel that is the perception. Standing at the altar for 27 years gives me the ability to hear some of the most intimate and personal concerns that sometimes people may not feel comfortable shouting at a town hall meeting or in public because of the embarrassment and the shame that comes with poverty. And I believe that we are at a time now that we have to understand that this is our responsibility to make those individuals not be so desensitized. I think what has to happen is we need a vision. We need a vision that's created by the people. The people are the one that's struggling. The people are the one that's in the neighborhoods, Bankole, every day. Many times as leaders, we want to come in and we want to will and we want to lord our agenda over people. What I want to do in my administration is listen to people, talk to people, ask them, what do they believe? What do they want? How do they see it happening? What changes do they want to partner and participate in? And I believe when we become open and receptive to those kind of conversations, we can do some amazing things.
I want to talk about the flooding in Southwest Detroit. That is, the issue of the water department and so forth. How would a Kinloch administration approach that issue? Because we have seen it. People have told me. I've gotten calls from so many people. Bankole, my basement has flooded, and we can't get no help, no intervention.
We definitely have an infrastructure problem, and anyone that has looked at it knows it's not just in Michigan. It's a problem that many municipalities and areas wrestle with across the country. One of the things that we need to do in any administration, but I would do in my administration, is to sit down and talk to the engineers and all of the invested stakeholders, those that are managing the system now, that are operating the system right now, and look at what's working and what's not working, what progress they've made, and where they still have gaps. What are the things that they want to do, but they cannot do because of lack of resources? And once we have those conversations and see where we are and look at what we've been doing that has not worked and some of the things that we want to do that we think will work, then we have to work tirelessly in order to ensure that we're able to achieve that. But Bankole, the first thing we need to do is to assess the situation internally. What I won't do is do like some people have done. I will not lie to people. I will not make false promises and get to the table, and then we look up under the hood and see that some of the things that has been suggested cannot be done. We will be honest, but one thing will be certain is that with a Kinloch as mayor, we will always ensure that we are doing the best we can for our people.
One of the responsibilities of the next mayor of Detroit would be to bring jobs to the city. And that's a question perhaps on everybody's mind. And people have, we've seen in the recovery of Detroit, every report that has been issued over the last decade about the recovery has shown that most of the jobs that have come into the city have gone downtown. They've gone into downtown, midtown area. It's like it concentrated. And it's like, this is not it's an open secret. Everybody knows it. So I'm curious, though, from your vision, from your plan, how would you bring jobs into the city? Because that's the number one issue I think a lot of people are concerned about. And of course, it's tied to income inequality again. What kind of jobs are coming to the city? Is it going to be low-wage jobs, or is it going to be jobs that really give people a healthy living?
One of the things we got to do, as I talked about in my announcement, is to create a workforce training program and a training center that will empower and equip residents and those that want a better life and income with opportunities to be trained for in-demand jobs that make upwards of $35 an hour. There are businesses in our community that have gone years that don't have access to those resources. What we need to do is empower our local businesses. We need to invest in the tech industry. We need to invest in arts and culture. We need to invest in our small businesses, making sure that they have access to funding and have access to resources. There is an unemployment problem that still exists in our city. What we need to do is do recruitment. We need to make sure that we have programs for jobs, personal enhancement, for personal enrichment. There needs to be educational programs. We need to present opportunities, realistic opportunities, not fantasies, but realities that can put people on a path to get to where they're trying to go. And I believe that our administration could lay out a plan. Bankole, I just believe that we are underusing our resources that we have access to. And I'm not just talking about just the money. I'm talking about the minds. There are too many gifted people that are in positions that don't have the opportunity to climb to go to the next level. Yes, we need to recruit some good talent, some great talent. But I believe that right here in the city of Detroit, we have some great talent. That's why I hope a candidacy like mine motivates people to get up and to stop waiting on other people to do it, but invest their energy, their effort, and their efficacy to become a part of the solutions and not just sit around and complain about problems.
So do you feel that at this point in time, you are sending a message that Detroiters who have moved, we've talked about this brain drain before in the city. In fact, I did remember a former mayoral candidate told me downtown at a meeting saying, my daughter is in Chicago. She wants to come back, but it depends on whether there are opportunities in the city. And it is known that many Detroiters, young Detroiters, have moved out of the city, moved to other states, New York, California, Chicago, you name it, in search of better opportunities. Are you suggesting that, in fact, it's time for them to come back?
That would be an intentional initiative and campaign to let people know not just that business is welcome in the city of Detroit, but we need to know that Detroit is a great place to live, that we can do something special. We have a great foundation. And what I want to do is get people excited around the world to want to partner with us, to come here and live with us, to stand alongside us, to be a part of something that I believe is going to be special. People ask me all the time, why would a pastor and a preacher get involved in politics? And what I often say is, why are we asking why would a pastor and a preacher get involved? The real question becomes, why did we ever stop? This city has always had clergy that served in full-time capacities in a municipality. We've always had ministers that served on city council, such as John Epphart. We've had so many others, the Pastor Nicholas Hood, father and son. We've always had pastors that sat in those particular seats. And one of the reasons they did that is because we understood that singularity of focus is not an option for everybody. It's a privilege. And Detroiters do whatever we need to do in order to get it done. What this would do, this administration would do, I'm praying that it will inspire people to not wait on other people, but to take the reins and partner with us in order to get excited to do something that can be used as a prototype, not just in Detroit, but across the world and much more in many more urban communities.
So the question, Reverend Kinloch, that many people have been asking also, of course, and it's in the media circles as well, is how are you going to pay for some of your programs?
The money is already here. When you look at all of the philanthropic dollars, all of the foundational dollars, they're expending millions of dollars. What if a table was convened? And what if the question was asked, you're spending 400, 500, 600 million dollars, whatever that number is. Bankole, think of the power if we could harness those dollars, if they can harness those dollars and participate in a cohesive plan in order to make an impact and make a difference in the area of jobs, in the area of education, in the area of housing, in the area of crime. We know that poverty is intricately connected to increase of crime and desperation of people to commit crimes. What we need to do is to make sure that we are partnering our partners, our allies, our nonprofits, our corporate founders, and CEOs, and our community leaders, our advocates and activists to come together and come up with a holistic plan. What we don't want to do is do like so many have done in the past, just walk in and say, this is what we think you need. I want to be the type of mayor that's not a me mayor, but it's a we mayor, that when people know that Solomon Kinloch is in the room, they will know that Solomon Kinloch is going to fight for them and always do what's best for them.
Let me ask you this, Reverend Kinloch. You grew up in the church of Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul. Her father, Reverend Seal Franklin, New Bethel. You highlighted that at the Fox Theater. I want you to talk about just the role of the church, the Black church, in economic development, because with you running for mayor, it puts the Black church front and center, perhaps in ways that never been seen before in the modern era in Detroit. You would be the first formidable, mayoral candidate who is a minister, an ordained minister, running to be the mayor of Detroit. Like you talked about, the fact that ministers have a long history, going back to, of course, the civil rights movement, Dr. King, Reverend Joseph Lowry, in terms of just being involved in social, economic empowerment and so forth. Talk about the role of the Black church here, the nexus between the Black church and social empowerment, and how that has informed your candidacy.
I've always been reared and raised that your theology ought to impact your sociology. How you worship God ought to impact and inspire the work you're willing to do on behalf of your fellow brothers and your fellow sisters and the community at hand. Bankole, what is troubling at times is that this privatization of religion, this prosperity gospel, many times this spirit of secularism has creeped into the church and motivated some to get to a place where they believe that it's just about me, my, and I. And I am of the opinion and belief that whenever God blesses us, and there's nothing wrong with being blessed, there's nothing wrong with being favored, but whenever we're blessed, economically, whenever we're blessed, relationally, whenever we're blessed vocationally, financially, professionally, it is our responsibility to use those platforms not just as a pedestal to build yourself, but as a platform that's so big and wide that you can use it to elevate an entire community of people. And that's what I spent the last 27 years of my life trying to do, to use my life as a vessel that could be used to elevate an entire community of people, whether it was by distributing thousands of packages of groceries on a weekly basis, whether it was doing COVID, not waiting on people to figure out how they were going to bridge the digital divide. Long before anybody stepped up, I called the members of Triumph Church together and asked them to join me in partnership. And we were able to give out thousands and thousands of tablets to the community, not to just members of our church. We have a policy. We don't just do stuff just for people in the house and the members. I believe we are called to make an impact into the world. And so from the tradition that I come from a tradition that life is not measured by what you get, but life is measured by what you're willing to give away. People have asked me, Kinloch, why in the world would you run for mayor? Why would you step from behind the pulpit for this much scrutiny? Why would you get into something that you don't believe or that many people believe is venomous? Because if something, my friend, is wrong, it can't get right until right people get in and try to work to make it right. And I believe that what motivates me is that theology that teaches us that sometimes you have to be inconvenienced for somebody else to be inspired, that sometimes you got to suffer for somebody else to be saved, that sometimes you got to go through difficulty for somebody else can be delivered. And if any part of my life and my living can be used to inspire this present generation and the young people coming behind me, because Bankole, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. The rent you pay for the space you occupy.
So So let me ask you this question then. What was at the back of your mind when you were getting ready to announce your candidacy for mayor? What was at the back of your mind? Because obviously, like you indicated, and I think many people know this, and everybody who has declared their candidacy to run knows it's a serious commitment. It invites scrutiny. It invites a spotlight, and it is not an easy undertaking. What was at the back of your mind? What was the final linchpin for you to indicate and to come out that you want to run for mayor?
For me, it's making sure that someone sits in that seat. I would never, because the question has often come up, what makes you better? And I don't like the term better because I don't depreciate and devalue anybody. But what makes me different and what makes me certain that this is a calling is the fact that I'm at peace with the decision because I know the character I have and what I'm willing to do to ensure that the people are served with the spirit of excellence. Bankole, everything in my life has always been a calling, has always been a sense of peace of what I believe that God is calling me to do. And I believe right now that this is a calling. I believe, secondly, that the people deserve to have a leader that has worked on their behalf, not for political expedient, not to get another job, not to set up to end up someplace after you get through this. But the only reason I'm running for mayor is because I want to be a vessel that can be used to make sure that all Detroiters are included. And that's what motivates me bigger than anything. Just like I felt as a child, laying in a bed one night, asking God for myself, is this all life has to offer? And if it is, I don't need to see no more of it. That feeling as a child is what's driving me now to be willing to step from behind the pulpit as I have done all of my 27 years and become the mayor of the city of Detroit if the people are willing to accept me.
And that's the question. If the people are willing to accept you, several years ago, I attended a town hall at City Hall, and I remember it was about it was a city council town hall hearing, and I remember this young lady walked in with 2 or 3 kids, and she walked up to the podium and was crying for help because she was getting evicted from her home in the city of Detroit. And her story was one of several stories that night. It was almost like a night of lamentation, Black lamentations. And just hearing the story, how raw and real it was, she was getting evicted from her home and she was asking city council to intervene. And I said that to say that there's an eviction crisis in the city of Detroit over in Kinloch. People who are watching this interview, some would be concerned about what you would do. Does your candidacy bring a final reprieve to this ongoing crisis of eviction in the city of Detroit, where those who are at the bottom of the economic scale can't even find a place to stay and call shelter in the city?
Well, Bankole, you hit on it, and that's why the work that you've done, not just in media, but the moral work that you've done, seeking to be a moral compass. We have got to have our trusted agents and our trusted individuals in positions to make sure that we're doing something about the everyday struggle of people. We have access to too much resource not to be doing something. And that's what my focus of my administration would do, would be able to sit down and say, where are the greatest needs? Someone has to prioritize people. Dr. King talked about it, that we cannot be a nation driven by profitability. We have got to make sure that we understand that people ought to be the priority and ought to be the most important line on the agenda. And what they will get in Solomon Kinloch is what they have received the last 27 years. like I have fought for this city and for the members of Triumph Church in that pulpit and in that building and in those walls and in the community. I will fight at City Hall to make sure that they can live with dignity and respect, and that they can have access and they can be delivered on the promise of what has been written, that they have a right. They have a right to pursue happiness in their own individual way. This is the land of America the beautiful. We got to make sure that it stays beautiful, not to just some, but to all.
As we round up this interview, I want to ask you about business leadership, corporate leadership in the city of Detroit. It has come up. It's a big issue. Obviously, the next mayor will have to work with business leaders, corporate leaders, CEOs, and so forth. And I'm curious about what your strategy to that is, because we've seen a lot of CEOs who have committed to downtown, and of course, we've seen some other business leaders who have talked about the fact that, hey, we feel like we perhaps need to move into the neighborhoods and so forth. And when you become the next mayor of Detroit, business leaders are going to come to you. Community folks are going to come to you. It's almost as if the mayor is the convener, if you will. And the mayor has a lot to say. He's the CEO of the city. He's above all CEOs. And I want to ask about what your roadmap would be to dealing with the CEOs in Detroit, the business leadership in this city.
The same way, Bankole, I've always dealt with those individuals who are interested in investing in the future well-being of the citizens and the residents in Detroit. As long as you are interested in investing in the future health of the people of this city, I'm open to working with you. I'm not anti-business. The city of Detroit needs businesses. We need more businesses. We need to invest in our small businesses as well. We need to make sure that they have access and they have equality in the area of funding and financing and opportunities and contracting. But we are also still receptive to new businesses coming in, to headquarters moving into the city of Detroit, to hiring more employees, to developing the ones that they've already got, to recruiting. And so we want to make sure that Detroit stays a city that is inclusive and attracting. But also we want to make sure that we have partners who are willing to partner with us, not just in their places and spaces, but they understand until all of us make it, none of us can really say that we made it. And we will hold those individuals accountable. But I have the belief that there are so many people. I believe that there are so many people of goodwill in this town that want to see this renaissance and this revival spill outside of downtown. I don't know if it's just the preacher in me, the optimism in me, but also I know that that's partnered with the reality of the relationships and the friendships and the conversations that I've had, of the excitement and the sense that this is a rare opportunity for us to build something bigger and something better and something stronger for us all.
The next mayor will have to be able to deal with the Trump administration, how you protect the city against some of the policies of the Trump administration. I'm just curious here about, as we round up this, I got one more question for you about just how you deal with the Trump administration. Obviously, you have members of Congress in Detroit who are represented in Washington, but how does the future Kinloch administration, if that were to be the case, would engage this administration that we're in now?
Well, I think we need to do what you see being done right now. We have to look for opportunities. Any administration, whether it's me or anybody else, have to look for opportunities to find common ground, to work on the things that we know we can work on. In this state, we know we need job development. In this state, we know we need growth, population. In this state, we know we need to improve education. We have things that we can work on, infrastructure. There are things that we can work on, poverty, affordable housing. There are things that are common ground that we can all work on. And what we have to do is we have to be willing to work with people that sometimes we may not agree on everything, but we can agree on some things. And that's what my administration would do. I want to be a unifier. I don't want to be a divider. I want to continue to do what I've always done, is bring people together. When you look at my history of leadership and you look at all of the campuses and locations that we planted across the country, when you sit in a seat in any one of our services, you don't know who you sit next to. You got PhDs sitting next to people who just recently got a GED. You got a doctor sitting next to somebody who needs to see a physician. You have people in the church who may have $1 million, and you may have people who know the difference of having $5 to get to work or not being able to have reliable transportation. And just like we bring people together in those smaller places and spaces, that's how we got to do in the city of Detroit. I have to remind people all the time when they say, oh, that's just the church. He only able to do that in the church. Well, the people that show up at church ain't just flying out of heaven. They ain't just flying out of nowhere sitting in them seats. The church's address, as Dr. Frederick G. Sampson said, a preacher of another generation in this city, used to say that the church's address is a collection and a compilation of the city addresses. And so when you're touching the lives of those people in the building, you're really touching the lives of all of the people that's outside of the building as well. And we want to continue to do that at City Hall.
The final question, Reverend Kinloch, is many people, and I've written about this, I've talked about this, I've talked to people about this. Many people are skeptical, have written of politicians. We've seen reports saying, people don't have faith in our institutions. They don't even have faith in the mainstream media. They don't have faith in some of our institutions. They've written them off and so forth. And of course, and I think about the 5,000 people who show up at Fox Theater obviously have faith in you. And they showed up for you. But there are other people out there who are skeptical about politicians and are skeptical about you. What is your message to those who are watching this podcast interview right now and may come into this interview skeptical about politicians and say, okay, that's just one more person trying to get into politics. Politics has not worked for me. It has not improved my life. Look where I am right now. And I hear that conversation sometimes in the barbershop.
Bankole, I must admit, after 27 years of coming to a church that had less than 100 people, and it had mammoth and moth into more than 40,000, from one campus to multiple campuses throughout the metropolitan area. If I was just living for myself, I would just sit down on the laurels of that after pastoring 27 years. But I believe that God has bigger plans for me, and God has bigger plans for Detroit. And when I see and sense that we can really do some good, people just want government to do good for the people it was created for. Government is not designed to be just occupied. I don't know where that has come from. It's not meant to just be occupied with aristocrats and bureaucrats and institutional politicians, but it's designed to be led and governed by the people it was created for. I'm just a person who want to do the right thing for the right reason, for the good and the benefit of people. And I got 27 years of showing people, you ain't just got to take my word for it. Look at the receipts, look at the relationship, look at the history of what I tried to do for the last 27 years. I'm just asking for the opportunity to do what I've been doing all the time, to take it beyond just the walls of the church and make sure it becomes infectious throughout this entire community.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Solomon W. Kinloch Sr., the senior pastor, Junior, the senior pastor of Triumph Church, a formidable candidate for the mayorship of Detroit 2025. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bankole. I appreciate you.